Disclaimer. I am a law student, and the legal information provided is not legal advice. For that, please hire an attorney. So anyway, the next person that we're going to be having on is, this is actually a really cool opportunity. For those of you who are not aware, there are a lot of issues happening with trans rights over in the UK. I mean, there are problems everywhere, but over there in particular, I'm going to not say too much because I'm going to let our guest introduce a little more on the topic. But essentially, the Tories are, from what I understand, pushing a lot of very anti-trans legislation. The Tories being, from what I understand, the more conservative party. Again, I need to learn more about politics over there. Maybe some of the Brit bongers in chat could tell me a little bit more, but I believe that's a correct understanding. And yeah, so we're going to be talking to Katy Montgomerie, who is a well, I don't know. I'll join the chat, and I prefer to let people introduce themselves. So without further ado, let's go ahead and join the call. Hello, Katy.
Hello.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks.
All right, awesome. Here, let me go ahead and I'll turn on my other camera so that you can see me. And hey, there we go.
Hi.
Hello
How
there.
Are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. So thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate this. I think this will be a really cool discussion. But before we get too far into it, can you introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, my name is Katy Montgomerie. I am a trans woman, and I argue online a lot.
Yeah,
I'm definitely like Twitter's resident dickhead. And I'm also in a metal band. If anyone likes thrash metal, you should check out my band Dehumanoid.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if I'm stuff, sorry.
I had no idea about that. That's amazing.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, all right. So you argue a lot online. So my understanding is that you do a lot, like you write a lot of articles, you do a lot of journalism. So could you tell us a little bit about like some of the work that you've done there before?
Yes. Well, I don't know. Like, I guess you could describe it as journalism.
Basically, yeah, to the extent, however you want to describe it.
Yeah. I guess basically I started on Twitter and like sort of earlier on in transition and just like arguing with people.
Yeah.
I used to do a lot of arguing about like atheism and stuff, and I've kind of got back into that. And I also argue about music a lot and other things. Like, you know, I'm just a knobhead who likes to argue. And being on Twitter, obviously you see people just making stuff up about trans people, like, you know, like most ridiculous stuff. And so I just come in and be like, well, that's not true. Like, here's the evidence saying that. Here's another position you hold, which is logically inconsistent with the one you've just said. And then I just carried on doing that. And I think I'm a bit addicted to it, which is a bit rubbish.
Yeah.
But
I mean, Twitter is like designed to be addicting. Trust me, I'm feeling it already.
Yeah. I mean, my personal best / worst is I once sent 595 tweets in one day. But anyway, so I ended up doing the same particular arguments about trans rights, particularly in the UK, like over and over again. And there'd be the same misconceptions. And it's, you know, usually from like the gender critical movement.
Right.
And so I just thought like some of these things, like one of the ones I've most recently done is people always ask, yeah, but what rights don't trans people have? So I just wanted an answer that I can just give them. So I've just been writing this article, which is literally just a sourced list per country of every country in the world, not quite done all of them yet, probably done 150 or whatever, where I can just link it to them as an answer, and then I don't have to do that argument again.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's basically what all of my articles are. It's like, here is a topic that comes up which is always wrong, and here's some information. I think the one that's like my most famous one, my greatest hit, is when J.K. Rowling did her like anti-trans manifesto thing.
Yeah.
I assembled like a team of people on Twitter, and we spent like 4 days like pouring a lot of energy into like I slept like 4 hours 4 nights in a row to write like a response to it and go through every single claim, and here's the evidence, and you know, here's a source backing up my claim, and here's why it doesn't make sense with what she's saying. And so yeah, I guess that's like what my articles are, just an extension of me being a knobhead. But I guess I have also wanted to kind of expand out a bit from just arguing on Twitter, because like the goal obviously is to, well, didn't I say obviously? A goal is to just get rid of ignorance about trans people.
Yeah.
And you can argue one-on-one with people, but that only reaches so many people. You can only have about 3 conversations on the go at once, whatever. Whereas if you write an article and 150,000 people see it, or if you make a video, then hopefully you reach more people. But
Yeah.
that's what I'm hoping. I'm just like trial and erroring as I go, I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, that's what we're all doing on here, right? And I think that's the best way.
Yeah.
I mean, like, obviously, like, if people are able to get educations and able, like, like, I apply the things I learned from my education, right? But that only takes you so far, right? Like, you do learn the best from just, like, trial and error. But, I kind of want to get into something that you wrote very recently, right? Like, sort of the subject of why we're here. So you recently wrote this article on Medium addressing concerns over GRA reform. So could you give the audience like a basic kind of like overall summary, and then we can go into like the nitty-gritty details of kind of what's happening over in the UK?
So in the UK, you can change your birth certificate basically to say that your sex or gender, or however you want to describe it, is what you've transitioned to. And that is a legal process we have. And basically, like there's a bit of history behind this. So anyway, that process uses a certain law called the Gender Recognition Act of 2004. And the history for that is ages ago, in 50s, 60s, whatever, if a trans person wanted to change their birth certificate, they could just ask the central birth certificate registry or however it works to change it, and they would just change it. And there wasn't any process at all. It would just get changed. And then in the 70s, a rich person, some multimillionaire, married a trans woman and then had a divorce. And she wanted some money from the divorce. And his lawyer argued that because she was technically a man, according to English law, even though she'd updated her birth certificate, that the marriage was actually illegal because we didn't have gay marriage then. So actually, she doesn't get anything, and the whole thing's annulled, and it was all rubbish. So obviously, it's a completely like homophobic bullshit stacked on top of transphobia, stacked on top of screwing a woman out of marriage stuff. But anyway, so that was like the legal precedent set, and then for a while, trans people just were trans women were legally men and trans men were legally women. Because that was like the legal precedent set from this one court case.
Right.
But then I think there was a few other stages, there was a few other incidents, and the precedent changed a little bit. But then in 2002, I think 2 trans women sued the UK in the European Court of Human Rights and won over privacy. And the European Court of Human Rights said the UK has to legally have a process for which a trans person can fully legally transition in all cases. So that's what the Gender Recognition Act was. It's literally a result of the European Court of Human Rights saying that the UK was breaking international law. So like that's quite high level. It's like above the level of the UK, which is a good sign, because we also inherit all their precedent from the legal trials and all this kind of stuff. So even if actually, I'm getting into something that's not that interesting. But anyway, so that's
I appreciate it, right? Like, I mean, like, I'm studying law right now, so I mean, like, a lot of this is right up my alley.
Yeah. So, so that was kind of like the foundation for it. But the government put in so many stupid caveats, and you must do this, this, and this, and they wanted to make it like prohibitively hard to get, I think.
Sure.
I don't know if they would literally admit to that, but there was lots of extras and people trying to strike off these things. They were trying to make it so religious organizations could overrule it and all this kind of stuff. But anyway, we ended up with the Gender Recognition Act 2004, which was a victory for trans people in the sense that it gave you some kind of pathway to privacy from people finding out your birth certificate or your medical history, because it provides you something called a gender recognition certificate.
Right.
And if you have one, then legally, like your employer and stuff aren't allowed to spread information about your transition. Like
that's really
the press
nice.
aren't allowed to out you, because like the British press, which is horrific still today, in the 70s and 80s would just find random trans women and just destroy their lives.
Wait, really?
Yeah, I mean, I know some of my, like, one of my friends who I talk to a lot, she was like working at a school, and she came out, and then she was like front page headline news, like, um, tranny is actually a man around your kids and all this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And like another example is Caroline Cosey, who's an actress from the 80s. And she was actually in James Bond, and she was in like a few other things. She was in Playboy.
Oh,
And
really?
then the UK press found her that she was trans, and like, this is a man, like destroyed her career, like destroyed her entire life, like all of her relationships fell apart and everything. So the Gender Recognition Act gave you this like legal privacy protection, which is actually part of Article 8 of the Human Rights Convention, European Human Rights Convention, I think,
Mhm.
which is a right to privacy. So it's like that right embodied for trans people. But anyway,
Interesting.
so the Gender Recognition Act was pretty good, but had quite a lot of problems, which I guess we'll get into. And recently, 2018, they proposed a reform just to get rid of the problems,
Okay.
which then stirred up basically what the gender critical movement is today,
Hmm.
basically off this one thing, which also like coincided with trans people being more visible,
Yeah.
and then also like it becoming a political issue rather than just a small like trans people issue.
Yeah. Well, we
Um,
have a lot of time, so why don't we? Also, what the hell? Oh. Someone linked your music into our chat. Also, it completely might have just destroyed the eardrums of some of our viewers. That's pretty heavy. Um,
yeah, it's like thrash metal, death metal, doom metal, and swing time. There's quite a lot of swing time in it. That's our like angle.
yeah. All right. But anyway, everyone is dying. Um, But anyway, so we have a decent amount of time, so we can explore some of these. We're not in as much of a rush as I was in my previous segment.
Okay.
Everyone is dying in chat. But anyway, so
Blue chat.
so why don't we start with some of the so the Gender Recognition Act came about as a result of it, as a result of the process that you discussed earlier. You said that it had some problems. So
Yeah.
could we talk about like some of the problems that it had up until even 2018?
Yeah, so there's lots of smaller problems, but I think the main issue in the way was in order to get a gender recognition certificate, which is what you get in order to change your birth certificate and for this like law,
Mhm.
is you need a medical diagnosis of gender dysphoria from like an accredited list of practitioners. So not just any doctor, it has to be a specific one in the UK. And in order to do that, you have to go through the NHS system. And the NHS system for trans people is incredibly bad, incredibly slow.
Mm.
So, for example, from the moment of me telling my doctor I'm trans and I want to be referred to our specialist system, to my first appointment was 33 months. And in that time, I went private, came out, changed everything, started hormones, like did everything. And I was already like, had already been living full time, actually for about 3 years at that point,
Right.
before my first appointment. And then there's then 6 months more before your next appointment. And then they have to do a diagnosis. And like, even someone like me who was, basically looking like this and
Yeah.
living my life as a normal person, I was still years away from being able to get a GRC and a gender recognition certificate. I'm going to call it a GRC from now on.
Yeah.
And like only recently would I have been able to get one. And only that is the point where I can have the things that the certificate provides, which also I think is worth mentioning. Perhaps we'll come onto that next. Because it's not just privacy. There's some other legal bullshit that it does.
So I mean, like the first thought I have is because I'm interested in sort of what it's able to provide people right now, but also like it does sound, because I mean, like the bad thing about it, at least as far as I'm hearing right now, is that like I understand that like I think that if you were trying to steel man the rationale for like having such a long waiting time is to make sure, oh well, we want to make sure that people are absolutely sure about what they're doing. We want to make sure they have a lot of time to make sure that they're not making any serious life decisions or changes or whatever. The problem is that like it does disadvantage, especially like if we're talking about and maybe you can explain this to me, like being able to get on like gender affirming care, right? Like it does, like having such a long waiting time for something like that or legal recognition is that it does disadvantage people who need that more than people who either pass pretty easily and so don't have as much of a need for it immediately, or people whose lives or work specifically, or for whatever reason, maybe they're trying to get married, but maybe they're trying to like pay for a house or whatever. Though, like if you're not like if that kind of a waiting time is going to negatively affect people who fall into those kind of categories over people who don't.
Yeah, for sure. So on the waiting times thing, the NHS system was designed to slow people down like that. That's explicitly part of it. Like the first appointment is, hello, we'll see you in 6 months. Like
Wait,
that's
really?
just it.
Are you serious?
So my first appointment, I turned up, didn't see a doctor, talked to like a secretary person. They gave me a form to fill in, which I could have filled in online or anything. And then they were like, cool, yeah, we'll see you in 6 months. And that was literally it. And I had to take a day off work, and I had to travel 3 hours across the country because there's only a certain amount of, there's only like 7 of these facilities in the entire country. And yeah, it's intentionally designed to slow people down, which is part of the problem. But also, it was designed in, I don't know, the 90s or something, when only thousands of trans people are out rather than tens of thousands. And so now the waiting queues to even get to the bit where you're being purposefully slowed down are years. And when I got my first appointment, it was I don't know 2 years ago, whatever. And it's just the queues are even worse now. And so it's not just the system designed to slow people down, which it is. It's also underfunding and just no change in the amount of like space for people to get in the queue and stuff.
Yeah.
So that's definitely part of it. But one thing you brought up, which I think might be worth mentioning, is about marriage and like other things it affects. For me right now, as a like financially secure trans person with a good job, supportive family, supportive friends, supportive colleagues, who passes fairly well. I mean, make up your own mind on that. But like I'm very privileged in my position.
Yeah.
And for me, the GRC won't provide, or I don't consider it to provide that much benefit. There is a few things. And for me, the two major things that it provides for me personally is if I want to get married, I will have to get married like as a man and be man and wife or man and husband. And be married as like Mr. Montgomerie and stuff for the whole process. And my marriage certificate, depending on where I get married, might even mention that on it.
Wait. So you have to get bottom surgery in order to be able to like be qualified as like your gender in a marriage certificate?
No, so you don't need. So this is such a mess. See, like I know in the USA you have like in some things it's like you need this and then you can do this, and then you need this and you can do this. In some places you can't do it, in some places you can do it.
Yeah.
In the UK, it is such a mess. So this might be a bit of a detour, but you can update your driving license and your passport, your bank details, your name, like everything you can imagine, you can update already instantly. Just like you can update your passport in like the same week if you want to update it. You can like all of those processes you can do already. None of them require surgery. None of them technically require hormones. So I actually updated my passport and my driving license before anything. Like I was pre everything. So you can do all that. So that's why the GRC doesn't quite provide as much value. It's just a few things like if you want to get married, then it's going to affect you. If you want to die, some people apparently do, then when you die, your death certificate is based on your birth certificate rather than on your passport, your legal name or anything like that.
Yeah.
So that can be very upsetting for people who, lose a loved one who then legally has to be misgendered at the funeral and all this kind of crap.
Yeah.
And there's a few other things like if you're applying for asylum or marriage with an international person, or I think if you want to be barred as a lawyer, and like all there's just a few little things here and there. Basically, for most of the time, you use your passport for anything that actually matters in most people's lives. Like if you want to go to the toilet, if you want to go in the changing room, if you want to use like a women's shelter or anything like the big issues, they use your passport. Or that's already like self ID. It's just there's a few corner cases which the GRC covers, which is why like it's quite hard to explain this because it's such a mess. Because it's not like, oh, you need surgery and then you can update your birth certificate. It's like you need to apply to the gender recognition panel, which needs to see evidence from several different things, including a doctor and your spouse and your work, and then they need to consider it. And like it's complete.
It's just a mess.
Junk. Yeah, it was a huge victory at the time compared to what we had, but it's rubbish. So, and it's so bad that there's only something like in the history of it since 2004, we've had something like 5,000 issued. And like the population in the UK is like 67 million.
Right. Like crazy small number.
Yeah, like I don't know what I should actually work it out. Whatever percentage of trans people that's estimated to be, but it's like hardly any. And it's because you have to pay loads of money to do it. You have to get a diagnosis and go through all this ridiculous system. You have to get like a note from your spouse. You have to like do all these other things. And you like have to be in a position where that seems worthwhile.
Yeah.
Which usually it's less worthwhile to the people who get to the point where they can get it. Yeah, so it's a bit of a mess. I do know a few people who have them. Most people I know who get them either get them because they want to get married, which was my big incentive before writing my article and doing all the research, or because they're worried that the UK might turn into some kind of fascist state they have to flee the country from.
Right.
And then you might want your birth certificate saying the right thing so you can go to another country and, just disappear, which is a serious consideration. Or because you just want privacy, like if you want to go stealth or you want to move to a new city and you don't want your employer, like, sniffing around or whatever, then, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a really
no. I mean, like, hey, listen, more information is better than less. All right, I totally appreciate it. So why don't we bring it up? So you said in 2018, they tried to propose like some reform, right? That was largely beneficial for trans people. So could we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the reform was basically to get rid of all of the crap parts of it. So one would be, so we didn't need a diagnosis from one of these like specialized professionals that you have to queue 5 years in order to see. Another would be it shouldn't have to cost £140 because it's just a piece of paper with your name on it. Another was there's a piece, like a section of the original legislation called Spousal Veto, which means if you're still in a marriage, like legally, your spouse can deny you from getting one because you have to get written permission from them. Yeah. So this only applies in a situation, because obviously if you come out as trans and they're not cool with that, then they'll divorce you, or you can actually annul a marriage if someone gets a gender recognition certificate. But anyway, like I expect that given that the moment you come out to the moment you can get a gender recognition certificate could be like 5 years. Probably if your partner isn't chill with that, they're gonna divorce you. Like if I married like a gay man 5 years ago, I would have thought we would have probably broken up by this point.
Right.
But the spousal veto only applies if you haven't had a divorce, so you're still married, and then they can block you. So it's not like they don't, the day you come out, they can say, oh, well, I don't want to be in this marriage anymore. Please, can we get a divorce first? It's like a situation where only if you get to the point where you've been married in a loveless marriage for 5 years, they can then choose to block you from getting your birth certificate changed. So it's kind of a pointless law. The reason it was put in is to do with gay marriage. So basically, it was like so some people didn't want to be in a gay marriage because that's bad, and so they could block you from it being legally a gay marriage. So that's a pointless law. There's a few other things about it which were kind of rubbish. Wanted to iron out, but the proposed reform was make it so we don't need a diagnosis from one of these specialized professionals.
Sounds good.
Get rid of the spousal veto. Make it cheaper. Make it so you don't have to like present info to a gender recognition panel of random people who you're never going to meet. Make it so you can appeal when they deny you. I actually know a lady who had GRS, and living full time for years and stuff, and applied for one, and they just denied her.
Wow.
So that's it. Well, like,
I mean, that was just it for like, it's just like all that effort for absolutely nothing.
Well, she can reapply, but to reapply, she then like obviously something was wrong with it, and so she has to go and get like a new doctor to re-diagnose her. Or
yeah.
I mean, she's already had surgery. I mean, what more information could they possibly need than here is a piece of paper from a surgeon saying, but yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
That was the proposed reform, but that got spun as trans people want self-ID. And I don't really know who first started this as the like, what's the word for it? Like the media face of it. But that soon became a bad thing, because this
is when turf arguments would come up, right? Like self-ID, like the people would extrapolate self-ID laws to be like, oh, well, if you allow trans people to do this, well, it introduces the possibility of any of these other things happening.
We've all heard the crappy self-ID things.
Yeah.
But just before we go on to that, did you want to ask more about the reform?
Oh yeah. No, I'm sorry. I was just like I was just like commenting on what you're saying right there. But yeah, let's talk. We can talk more about the reform. Yeah. No, we're all good.
Yeah. So basically, the campaign was. So the government said, right, we're gonna try and update this law, and we're gonna try and do all of these things, and we're gonna have a public consultation. So that's just where members of the public can write in and say, I think this, can you consider this in reforming it? And it was actually targeted mainly at trans people, like, what do you actually want out of gender recognition reform?
Sure.
But that like kicked off, and it was
mainly
like so there was a few major like groups in the UK who started campaigning hard against this, and it became like a mainstream news item, and literally, no exaggeration, every single week for 3 years, I think maybe actually now they did miss 1 week, but there was at least one, often as many as 5, like anti-trans articles in one of our mainstream newspapers.
Are you serious?
Like about this, about like just trans people. They made up some story that we have this horrible child murderer in the UK called Ian Huntley. And I think I'm not sure which newspaper, one of the major newspapers just invented that he was trans now. And
with no proof, with no evidence.
Literally no evidence. And it was so bad that this child murderer's lawyer sued the like the newspaper or whatever. I don't know if it's sued, but like wrote a thing to the newspaper, and they had to post a retraction saying Ian Huntley has never considered transitioning and doesn't want to be known as a woman. And I mean, there was loads of stuff like that. There was some like both sides opinion pieces, and then there was like negative bullshit, and then there was completely fabricated stuff like constantly. So on mainstream news, like people debating stuff. But the point is that they were always saying self-ID, like we're opposed to self-ID because any old man could say he was a woman, but it was never really communicated to the public what that actually meant. And now, like I posted a tweet about it the other day, and got a ridiculous response. I still think 99% of the people opposed to the reform think self-ID means suddenly trans women will be able to go into the women's toilets. Like that's the main opposition to Gender Recognition Act reform is, oh yeah, but we don't want trans women in the women's toilets, or we don't want them in women's sport, or we don't want them in changing rooms. But the thing is, none of that is related to the Gender Recognition Act. Like none of it.
None.
Because we all trans women have been using the women's toilets in the UK legally specifically since 2010, but legally sort of suggested since 1999, but actually it's never been illegal. Like we've been in women's sports since 2004, maybe.
Oh wow.
Women's shelters have never had a policy against trans women. Every single women's shelter has always been accepting of trans women. There's no actual like situation of the things people were worrying about where it actually was relevant. Another one
Yeah,
is
yeah.
prison. Like
Mhm.
people are worried that, oh, if any old man can pretend to be a woman, then all of these people like Ian Huntley will be pretending to be women in order to go to women's prisons. And we did actually, in the run up to this, have a really unfortunate case, which I'm sure everyone's heard of, called of a person called Karen White.
Mhm.
And Karen White is a trans woman who's also a rapist, and she then got moved to a women's prison and then sexually assaulted 2 people, I think. And that's obviously terrible. But that was again nothing to do with the Gender Recognition Act because which prison you get put in, you don't need a gender recognition certificate in order to be put in the correct prison. And also, if you do have one, you can still be denied being moved to the correct prison. So it's not actually the thing that makes the difference because our whole law is a huge mess. And it's not just like we have one central thing. It's like,
Yeah.
we've got thousands of years of legal precedent that all overlaps each other and all this kind of rubbish. So, so the whole campaign ended up being an argument about whether trans women should be allowed to go in women's spaces. But that's not what it's about. Like that's just completely something else. But that just ended up being the argument, and then that's where all the opposition was, which is incredibly frustrating.
Yeah.
So what then happened was, so they extended the consultation. They dragged it out for years, and then once they closed the consultation, they were like, "Oh yeah, we'll come up with a solution to this," and they just left it for a bit.
They
And we
shouldn't do
had
anything with it.
Brexit. Yeah, we had Brexit, and then we had like the government changed leader like 5 times because it was all a disaster, and Brexit's a complete disaster. And then they just randomly leaked to one of our major newspapers that not only were they going to throw the whole gender recognition reform in the bin, they were also going to introduce a law banning trans women from women's toilets.
Wait, what?
Uh,
Just for
which was
no goddamn reason.
like out of nowhere. So this was a pretty shit week. So J.K. Rowling did her big coming out as a transphobe.
Yeah.
Then Trump announced that he was going to make it legal so that you can discriminate against trans people in healthcare. And then
Remember that?
they released this information that they were going to try and ban trans people from toilets in the UK, all in the same week. I had a bit of a meltdown.
I can imagine.
So-
I mean, like I was there. I was obviously privy to the first two because I mean, like everyone was talking about J.K. Rowling, and I'm over here dealing with the healthcare situation in the U.S. But like with the UK, I mean, I didn't like there was so much happening. I didn't realize that was being announced that week.
Yeah, so that was all the same thing. And there was a huge outcry because, like, you've just been asking what improvements can you make for 3 years, and then you're just going to say, oh, well, fuck that, we're actually going to make things worse.
Right.
So there was actually a huge outcry, and it was such an outcry that, like, even our Prime Minister noticed, and we're not quite sure what happened behind the scenes, but basically they dropped that little plan, which is, I mean,
well, that's good.
Because it's just barbaric. There was a time where I was seriously thinking, do I need to have a plan to escape like the country? Like, where do I need to go? Should I go to Ireland because I want to be near my parents, or should I go to like Netherlands or even like somewhere further? It was pretty grim. But so anyway, they finally, after ages and ages and ages, released the consultation results this week and said what they're actually going to do. So basically, they're doing nothing. They've decided to do nothing. They moved the process online. That's their big selling point. Is like, you used to have to fill in a bullshit form, and now you have to do it online. Like, great.
Great.
But they also released the results of the consultation, and something like 66% of them were positive and in support of the reform, like in its entirety, and something like 85% were in support of the reform, like at least partially, because there's so many different aspects. We should get rid of spousal veto, we should get rid of the fee, we should get rid of the enforced waiting time, we should get rid of the medical diagnosis and all of this kind of stuff. So almost everyone was in support of it. We also had the British Medical Association. Its like official stance was reform the Gender Recognition Act in its entirety. We also had the Equality and Human Rights Commission, which is like one of our top human rights, or the top one for the UK, said that we should reform it. And the person in charge of it just said, no, we're not going to do it. So there's been a big outcry from it. But obviously the gender critical groups have been selling this as a big win because, I mean, in one sense, it kind of is a win for them because even though most people who cared about it were opposed, what were in support of the reform, and like so was all of the legal opinion, and so was the medical opinion, and like the actual analysis of the situation is all of that opposition is to it is about something else, which is completely unrelated. Like it didn't make any sense, but they have someone who's sympathetic to them in power, and so that's it. They just throw the whole thing in the bin. So now we've had 3 years of like intense media frenzy over here, which has really drummed up some like proper trans hate. For literally nothing. They've agreed to open some extra gender clinics basically to help people with healthcare. There's 7 at the moment, I think, and they're going to make it 10 by 2025 or something. Kind of crap. Like it's not really achieved anything.
It's basically just kind of like a hey, we'll give you at least this much, take it or leave it kind of a thing.
Yeah, I mean,
it's kind of just like it's like a token gift, you know, to make them. Yeah, so it's like they're doing like they can say that they did something when it's not really like of consequence.
So this is my personal, almost conspiracy theory opinion, I guess, but I feel like the lady in charge of this is called Liz Truss, and she's some government minister, and I think that she's sympathetic to the gender critical position or is connected with them in some way or something. And when they wanted to see, can we ban trans women from women's toilets, floated that idea, there was a huge outcry, backed off from that, and then just thought, right, we're just going to do nothing then, and we're just going to drop it. But if we just do nothing, like literally say we're throwing it in the bin, then there'll be a huge outcry. So we're going to try and hide that behind, we're also going to open gender clinics and we're putting online and we're going to reduce the fee to less than it is now, but still have a fee. And they were trying to like headline those things. But there has been an outcry. So Liz Truss is a Conservative. The Conservatives are in power at the moment. Another Conservative MP said that she shouldn't have that job, which is quite rare for people to do that here, apparently. There's a cross-party. The only cross-party group in the whole country for anything is a cross-party LGBT group, which has members from every single political party in the UK, which is like 7 or 8 of them, of the major ones. And they all wrote a letter saying that this isn't good enough. So it's still kind of ongoing, but I have absolutely no hope. Like, I don't think anything's going to happen for years because of this. So it's pretty wank, to be honest.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's the impression I get. I mean, like right now, like it's a very different issue from what it sounds like we're dealing. I mean, like they're different but similar, right? Like over here in the US, we have a lot of like similar rhetoric from people, like especially conservatives, right? Like Trump has continuously gone on and saying, we love I love LGBT people. We're totally like the Republicans here. We're totally LGBT friendly. A great example is like Ariel Scarcella. Oh my God. Amazing. I will not. Or hey, listen. Caveat: I am not advocating for political violence. But interesting T-shirt. I'll let the audience read it.
I am strongly advocating for Municipal Waste, which are a very good thrash metal band. Check them out.
Oh my God. But anyway, So we see a lot of very similar rhetoric from the conservatives over here, right? Like Ariel Scarcella is a great example of someone who basically has just kind of like been tokenizing a lot of minority people on at least YouTube, basically, for the purpose of being like, hey, we're minorities and we're totally for conservatives. They love us. They don't do anything against our interests. And then you have Trump literally this past summer, not only repeal healthcare rights against trans people, something else that he did just this year. And there's a ton of other shit, right? But something else that he did just this year, which has gone a little more under the radar, but which I paid attention to because like I work with, like I do a lot of, like even right now, I do work with like people who are homeless in my law school's clinic. But before I came to law school, I was program director for a homeless outreach nonprofit in Memphis. They passed, or they're trying to, they either did pass or they were trying to pass like legislation to the effect that it would give homeless shelters not only the ability to be able to deny trans people from staying at the shelters, right? Like if it's a women's homeless shelter, then it could give the shelter the ability to deny the trans women from being able to go there. And additionally, on top of that, it also would it also gives like these organizations like basically a how-to guide, like a how-to spot a trans woman step-by-step guide.
No, I saw this because
Yeah.
covered it. And she's great for this kind of thing. Yeah, it's like, why not look to see if they're taller than average or if they've got an Adam's apple?
Yeah, exactly. It's basically like it's literally just like a how to clock a trans woman by the Conservative Party, right?
By Donald Trump, yeah.
Yeah. And so it's always crazy to me how you see, and this is why usually I don't necessarily trust like what people say their opinions are, right? Like I always look at objective, like what a party does objectively. I don't really care about the rhetoric that they peddle, right? Like, you know, Trump over here has done irreparable harm to the trans and like the broader LGBT community and many other communities. Like the list is long. But I think it's yeah, but it sounds like your party has like a similar issue where they haven't been necessarily as overt about it because of like a risk of public backlash. But it's a similar kind of thing, right? Where they say that they say, oh, we're so supportive of trans people. Oh, we're going to do all these things. When in fact, the actions pretty clearly speak to the opposite.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, our political system is quite different to yours.
Right. I mean, the analogy will not be perfect, but yeah.
Yeah. But in the Conservative Party, who are in power at the moment, including some MPs who are voted in power, are very pro-trans. Like all the LGBT conservative politicians seem to be on this side, and there are, you know, I say LGBT, all of the gay men politicians.
Yeah.
That we have.
Right. Like that. Yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah, because they're the only LGBT people who exist. Like there's quite a lot of people who are supportive. All of the like all of our major opposition party is supportive. Like they recently had the discussion in the other house. We have the House of Commons and the House of Lords, and in the House of Lords, some women MPs from various parties all spoke up in support of it. So it's not so like Trump like says I love you and then signs an order to literally end your life like in the same 5 minutes. Whereas the Conservatives in the UK, I mean, they lie about things all the time, but it's much more blustery and then the result is much more watered down. Like, oh yeah, well, we want to do the best thing for trans people, but we also want to protect women's rights, you know, casually implying that maybe they're opposed to each other. And then they'll do something and it won't be terrible. And it's like, we're not in danger of, you know, the NHS is allowed to discriminate against trans people. That's not going to happen here in the next decade because that's just way too extreme for the UK. But then equally, probably nothing positive will happen either. So, like, potentially, you're going to vote in Joe Biden in this year. Good luck.
I mean, that's the hope. We're certainly crossing fingers. Everyone, you better fucking get out there and vote. I swear to God, if you don't, I'm going to be so fucking livid with you. But yeah,
if that happens, then like you can sign in quite sweeping legislation quite quickly. Like, you know, Trump's doing all these executive orders, like, let's just take away loads of people's rights. Like in the UK, if they were, if the Conservatives were like, oh, we're gonna, like, if they actually tried to ban trans women from women's toilets, they could announce it. Then there'll be a huge argument in Parliament about it. Then someone would inevitably sue them, and it would have to go to the top UK court, and then it would have to go to the European Court of Human Rights, and then like that could take literally years, and it probably would take years, which is why it was quite a scary proposition. Because if they did it, there would kind of be this like public aware kind of half ban, which like isn't necessarily legally enforced, but isn't necessarily not legally enforced, and yeah. So that, I mean, that's the difference we have here. So we're like, the UK is quite good for trans rights. I've been going through this list of all the different countries, and you know, some countries are horrific, and the UK is definitely in the top 10%, quarter or something. Like, you have states that are better than the UK, like Colorado, California. I was trying to remember some of the others, but then you have states that are just way worse, like Tennessee. We're in the middle of where the US is on trans rights. Trans people can serve in the military here, so we've got that.
Yeah,
But
that's. I mean, that's nice. I always
yeah,
tell the story about how originally I was going to be a JAG lawyer. Because that's a viable dream now. Great.
yeah.
Honestly, I mean, probably for the best. I don't know. I'll go on and I'll do my politics thing. Hopefully, we'll see how that goes
Yeah.
over.
Oh, you've got your first ever like trans politicians over there. Though you've got
Oh yeah,
Danica
no.
Roshong,
Hmm.
and you've got Sarah McBride, and you've got that trans lady Satanist who just got voted in.
Wait, what?
Oh, I can't remember what it's about. She's like just like a really minor political role. It was in a place where I can't remember quite what happened, but like some trans lady, explicit Satanist, has just got voted in somewhere doing something, and I thought it
Oh
was
fuck,
amazing. And she
that's
ran on
crazy.
like a policy of like trans rights, fuck God or something, and there was just in a place where there's no opposition. To, like someone ran unopposed for years and years, and she just was the first opposition, and everyone voted for her.
All
So
right.
like you've got that, whereas we do not have any like if I try to run for any political office next year or something
Mhm.
or whenever the next time I could, like it would ruin my life. And
Wait, how did it ruin your life?
then it's just
How did it ruin your life? Just because like the
the,
press and like.
the press would absolutely destroy anyone who sorry, I'm pouring another drink. The
You're all
press would
good.
absolutely destroy anyone who oh sorry, Poppy's fighting with the lid, one sec.
You're fine. You're fine.
Yeah, the press would destroy people. It would just be relentless. Um, you know, yeah, but I mean that'd basically be it.
Right. I mean,
I mean, I'm
I
sure.
basically get that. You know, like I'm sure that if or I don't know, like I'm optimistic and pessimistic at the same time. Like I know that I would like the U.S. press, especially like conservative media, will definitely do like a lot of the similar kinds of things to me, if and when I run in the future. The difference is like I don't know. Like I feel like I also just feel like they're basically just gonna focus on I always say that it's gonna be like two things, right? They're gonna focus on the trans shit. They're just gonna vaguely gesture at me. I don't know. They're gonna accuse me of being like a rapist, pedophile, sexual, whatever. What like they're gonna make me out to be like some kind of sexual deviant. They're just gonna vaguely gesture, and then the other thing is that like they'll look at me and be like, oh, this person is like even somewhat left leaning. Well, that must mean they're basically a communist, right?
It's so funny that if the Democrats ran in the UK, they'd be right of the Conservatives.
Oh no, trust me, I'm fully aware.
Right.
Yeah.
They're too far right for the UK, but they're your left-wing parties. So.
Oh yeah, I know. Trust me, I am fully aware that like like the Democratic Party in like terms of like global politics. Oh yeah, they're super conservative, right? It's just that like but it's also hilarious that like by American standards, like Donald Trump literally will like unironically say that Joe Biden is like the head of or is like running like Antifa and the BLM protests, and it's like goddamn, I almost kind of wish that Biden was this person, this super left leaning person that the conservatives always make him out to be, because then he might actually be able to get something done.
It's so transparent because literally every single thing that they called Bernie Sanders, who was a bit more left, all of it, like, without any restraint at all, they just moved straight on to Biden. Like Biden, who was voted in specifically because he was more right wing than. Bernie Sanders.
No, anything that Bernie ever said, and because I guess everyone everyone thinks, oh, Bernie, he must be communist, then because he belongs to the same party as Biden, that Biden was also by that amazing transitive project. Again, we're talking about like some really high, some galaxy brain logic here, right? That Joe Biden must also therefore be a communist because that's how that works. It's yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, just going back to like you running for office,
sure,
or anyone,
yeah.
US and the media, the US media, it's a very different like beast to the UK media, and like you have Fox News and like Breitbart and stuff, which is mental.
Oh yeah,
you also have very like I guess liberal rather than left wing, but you do have like left wing media organizations. And like the stuff coming out the US in support of trans rights compared to the UK, it's incredible. Like there'll be a story like someone like I don't know, Huffington Post or and I was on NBC the other day. Like they'll do a piece about trans people and it will be either neutral or slightly good. And that just is like, it blows my mind. Like in the UK, none of them, literally not a single news outlet will even do a neutral story on trans people. Like our
Really?
most left major newspaper is The Guardian,
Mm-hmm.
and you have The Guardian in the US. And our Guardian is so transphobic that your Guardian wrote a letter to our Guardian saying The Guardian in the UK is transphobic and we distance ourselves from their views and they need to fix it because it's so bad. Like all of it, every single, from our far right paper to our like middle left paper, all our major ones, they're all like relentlessly transphobic. All of them. I'd say The Guardian is actually one of the worst ones because, you know, there's something like the Daily Mail, which is one of our sort of like far right papers that supported the Nazis in 1930s. Like that will be like, oh, this trans person's actually a man, or you know, like, you know, this trans person transitioned and detransitioned, and like that's the only story we're focusing on. Like the Daily Mail doesn't give a fuck, but the Guardian will be like, this feminist has concerns about about what
heavy quotations concerns.
Yeah, and so that's presented as like then the left-wing view on this, and they always present it as feminists versus trans rights activists.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, and I think that's. Or sorry, go on.
I was just going to say the Daily Mail hates feminists and trans feminists, so they don't care. They'll just screw everyone. But when the Guardian does it, it's specifically trans people. So.
I mean, like, I think that's because there are a lot of like organizations over here. I think that a couple I've talked about them on here. Wolf is an example. The Heritage Foundation is an example. Like there have been like multiple like organizations which have been like there's TERF organizations, right? Like that's what they are. They'll advocate themselves as like radical feminist organizations, but like they're TERF organizations, right? Yeah. And the thing that they do, that they've been doing a lot recently, is like they will tell people who go and speak in like public forums, whether it's like town halls or you know, like other public events where people discuss like political ideas, right? They will tell their members that if they want to advocate against the rights of trans people, that the best strategy for it is to posture it not in terms of trans people bad, but rather in terms of we want to protect women, right? Yeah. Because the latter comes off as a lot more or a lot less inflammatory and seemingly to the person who can't reasonably tell the difference or doesn't know as much about the particular issue, like a lot more benign, right? Like it sounds like, oh, she's just concerned about women. Oh, she's just concerned about herself or her daughters, her precious daughters, you know? When in fact, like that's almost the more dangerous rhetoric to me, right? Because I think that like any reasonable person, like usually when I make my content, I'm trying to target like what I deem to be like the reasonable person watching. Like I think that most, like I think I think I can get through. What?
I apologize for my t-shirt then.
Oh, you're fine. But I think I can get through. I'm operating on the assumption I can get through to most reasonable people. And so like if there's an organization that's just like completely transphobic, like completely mask off or whatever, I don't have to worry as much about them. Usually I'll just laugh at them and do like a couple dunks and that's it. But like with this kind of rhetoric, it's dangerous because like to someone who doesn't know better, like you have to be able to dissect exactly why it's transphobic, because like if you don't tell them, then they'll probably just kind of run with it if they don't know any better, you know?
Oh, sure. So the last article I wrote on Medium actually was about like bad faith arguments. And I finished it by pointing out that like if someone says like you're a man in a dress, you're a danger to my children, I think you're a pedophile, like I hate trans people, like that's horrible because they're a bigot and they want to take away my rights and they're going out the way. But they've said it. Like they've said what they think and they're standing for what they believe in. And I can argue against it because it's very easy.
Hello? Hello? You froze. Did I lose my internet? Chat. How's my connection? Oh no. All right, so it's a problem on her end. Chat. Katy. No. Damn, we were just coming up on the end. If we have to end the segment here, I guess that's the end of the segment. RIP. The CIA. Alright, good. Yeah, the CIA is coming for her. Oh no. You look fine. Does she have virgin? All right. J.K. Rowling did it. Yeah, that's the headcanon. J.K. Rowling heard we were talking shit on her, and actually, oh, you're back.
Sorry, my internet cut out.
Yeah, you're all good. You're all good. Don't worry, I'll edit it after the fact. So we're actually just coming up on the hour.
I was gonna say, do you have time, or should I stop?
Yeah. Do you want to get so I don't know. Do you want to give any concluding thoughts? I know it's a little weird of a transition from like the line that we were talking about. We were talking about like how people can often like how people will rhetorically phrase bad faith arguments, right? We can talk about that more, or you can give some concluding thoughts, whatever you prefer.
I guess I'll just finish the thought I was on, which is the gender critical movement has divorced itself from feminism and has just become about opposing trans people, but using this like turfy language, in order to like hide their actual position, which is just stop trans people. I mean, that's literally it. It's not even a specific law thing. They just say, I hate gender ideology. The general reactionary stuff, but they cloak it in concern for women, which it isn't concern for women because all of their policies actually hurt women. And if they're concerned for women, they'll be opposing sexism, but they're often contributing to the sexism. Anyway, so I think, and that sums up the general opposition to the Gender Recognition Act reform, which is why if you say to someone, like just pick a random English person who is opposing it and say, why don't you like the Gender Recognition Act? Why are you pleased it didn't go through? Absolutely guarantee 9 out of 10 of them will say, I don't want men in the changing room of my daughter. And that's not related. Like trans women already use women's changing rooms. They already use the women's toilets. They're legally protected to do so. All of it is just a culture war. And it's all exactly from what you were saying. The like hard right organizations are saying, oh, just click it in feminism. So I guess that's my closing thought.
Yeah.
And also my other closing thought is check out my Pikachu earrings.
Oh my god, that is adorable. No, but I really appreciate it. And like the thing is, like I don't know, like I see the UK as like an example of like where the US is probably heading in the future, because I think that right now we have like a lot of very overt transphobia, but I think that like as time goes on, we're probably going to see a lot more of this kind of like cloaking transphobia in the guise of like just concerns for women. I mean, we already sort of have that, right? But my intuition is that we're probably going to be seeing a lot more of that kind of rhetoric in the future. So it is good to talk about. Yeah, exactly. So no, I definitely like the trans sports argument, especially right now, since that's something that's being talked about a lot. No, it's definitely something on my mind. Well, hey, thank you so much for coming on. Do you want to shout yourself out?
I'm Katy Montgomerie. Follow me on Twitter if you like to see people arguing relentlessly. Check out my thrash metal band that you all heard earlier, and I hope you like crabs.
Crabs? Wait, those are crabs? I thought they were flowers. Oh my god, that's actually so much better. My favorite food is crab. For people who know me.
No, one of my favorite animals is crab. Don't hurt the crabs.
I'm so sorry. I actually had some of your friends last night for dinner, so I apologize.
I wish I hadn't come on this stupid stream. Fuck you.
Listen. I'm sorry. I guess we can't be friends, but hey, at least we had the chat. It was a good time. But yeah, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. All right, I'll talk to you later. All right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.